My name is Kannan Muthukkaruppan. A pleasure to welcome you to the YugabyteDB Friday Tech Talk series for engineers by engineers. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, based on wherever you're joining us from. My pleasure to welcome on the series today, Abhishek Mishra. Over to you, Abhishek, for introductions as well as jumping right into the topic. But go for it.
Sure. Thanks, Kannan. Welcome, everyone. Again, greeting of the day to everyone. This is Abhishek, currently working as a developer advocate and taking care of application development part of it. And I've been doing Python programming and then software engineering for last almost 4.5 years. So thanks again. So I think we should not wait more and let's get started with the session. So I'll be talking about, in fact, we'll be looking into the one of the security features called rollback, a role-based access control in Yugabyte. And let's get started with it. Before getting started, these are the topics to set the expectation from the session. We're gonna cover what exactly is RBAC, why do you need it, and what are the different aspects that are covered under RBAC. So role, resources, privileges, and there are a few related topics which is related to security part of it. We'll briefly talk about it, and we'll not go deep dive into a row or column level security, but the focus area today is to mostly focus on RBAC. So let's get started with it. So RBAC, which is like a very famous security method, right? Access method, which is role-based access control. So basically this is to give you your computer resources and authorization level access when you talk about in-general resource access in computer programming. But when it comes to database, of course, the resources that we have is database. So basically it's a access control mechanism to give access to your databases and the objects that are relying on it. And it is based on the principle of list, which is again a security principle where you limit the access as per the intention and then the work of the user. So that's what RBAC is completely based on. And then in YugabyteDB, the RBAC consists of the collection of privileges, resources, and the roles. And why do we need it? I think it's pretty straightforward to enhance control over user access over a database, right? We don't want anyone to randomly access any data of the world. So in the modern application also, in fact, not limiting to user, even when we design multi-service or let's say microservice architecture as well, each service has been given a privilege and access at a particular level to access any data or in fact other services. So I think the same principle applies here. Whenever you create any application which is data driven, right? You have to give access on the basis of what kind of function or the action this particular service or user going to perform. So the entire principle is based on that. Again, this gives you a very fine and easy way to manage access to a data, which is very error prone when you go and set up the permissions individually, right? And for this entire session, we'll be since YugabyteDB supports both terms of APIs, YSQL and then YSQL, which is for SQL as well as the Cassandra query language. But throughout this session, we'll go through RBAC via YSQL API, and not to forget, YugabyteDB RBAC is completely Postgres compatible. So whatever actions and then the principles are applicable in RBAC on Postgres are compatible with YugabyteDB as well. So
yeah, I think,
talking about
Abhishek, I think the last point you made was an important one. The mental model or sort of the paradigm in which you think about access control. We didn't try to come up with a brand new one. In fact, Yugabyte's query layer inherits from Postgres. It's highly Postgres compatible distributed database. And that is one of the reasons why you almost get the same syntax semantics for even the RBAC features. So people who are already comfortable with Postgres's RBAC system are almost going to find this talk probably a little repeat, or in fact, I already know this, which is a good thing. There's basically should be no surprises in the model there. Thanks, Abhishek. Go ahead.
Exactly. Thanks, Kannan, for that point. Yeah. So, so basically, roles in YSQL can represent an individual user. A Kannan can be a role, Abhishek can be a role, and it can be a group of users as well, right? And basically, this role encapsulates a set of privileges, which we'll be definitely looking into subsequent slides and the session as we move forward. Now, roles are essentially for actually, as we discussed earlier, to give access control over to your database cluster, right? And so when in terms of RBAC in YugabyteDB, there are a few important points that you have to make sure. So roles which have a login privilege that will look into the examples that I'm going to show you during the demo are users. Hence, all users are roles, but not all roles are users. And we'll definitely look into what exactly this means during the demo part of it. And role can be granted to other roles, and kind of you can make a hierarchy over it, like role 1, role 2, and then you can actually inherit. These roles can be inherited downwards. And yeah, and of course, it's always better to create role based on group, right? So for example, if you have an engineering group or you have a QA team, it's better to create a group based roles so that set of actions are limited to that, right? Rather than creating individual roles. So for example, if we have a engineering team and if I suddenly create a role by Kannan, we certainly don't know what exactly Kannan is going to do. But let's say we bound it by group, we will have a scope to it. So basically it limits the scope by actions and the privileges that particular group will have. So it's always a best practice to create a role by group, go by group level rather than going on individual level. Forget about development. Whatever we are talking about is definitely highly recommended for all the production system. So yeah, do follow that. So there are some default roles associated with YugabyteDB. So if you use this meta command du, it will give you a list of default roles. So for example, Postgres is here, which is again a default user and the role you will find in PostgresDB, which has all super user and then all the privileges to create roles and impact. So it's like a superset, a pseudo you can consider as a pseudo for your database. And then same goes for YugabyteDB, which is a default user for YugabyteDB. So you can go for user Yugabyte, which is again compatible with Postgres. And we have YB admin, and then we have YB extensions to create extensions. So extensions are usually like if you want to access or create set of functions and then act them as like a module, then at that time you can use this particular role. And then same goes for FTW. So we'll definitely look into it. The more we go and we'll see demo, I'll show you how exactly it looks like. So moving ahead, I'll just right now I'll just show you the examples of what exactly roles are, how to create roles, how do you list it and revoke it. And here's the catch. So before performing any role or the action on roles, you should, when running a YSQL, when running a YugabyteDB server, you should enable a flag called YSQL enable auth is equal to true, right? But this is applicable for the open source version that we have right now, and this flag is by default enabled for Yugabyte Anywhere and managed version. So you don't have to worry on those parts. But whenever you are using open source version, make sure that for the role and then authentication part, you have to enable this flag. So I'll just move to my terminal. Okay. I'll just start this server. I'm sorry. So once we start the server, I have created a default, a very example database called employees, which has like a few number of rows, which has a dummy data. So I'll just show you that. How does it look like? So once we started as I mentioned, we'll use YSQL API. So I'll just log into that and then Yes, and the employee table. So these are like a very sort of template data. You can say we have five rows. These are the employees and their address, salary, and then account number, right? So now let's look into like how to create a role fast, like a very user sort of role, not with any privilege or sort of thing, right? So I'll just create a role on. So for the smooth demo, I already have the command handy with me, so I'm just going to use those to say create role and then the role name, and with so this is like a default user. This is not exactly the principle we earlier talked about. In the subsequent demo, I have a really good example of the scenario, and in that scenario, how you can actually create role and grant the privileges and how you can revoke it and all those things. Just to give a gist of how exactly roles looks like and then how do you create it, I'm going to just show you this demo. So it says create role, and now to verify whether this role is created, we can just list the list from the PG roles table. So I've selected role name and whether it's super user or it can log in or not. So you see, we have created a new user called Alan, right? And you see the role super, it says false, but it can log in because we have used with login here. And in fact, I can show you in another terminal here with the same user. I can go and just log in here, and then the password is So this means that Alan is working fine. And then, so this is without any super user access. Now with super user access, you just have to add another command while creating it. I'm just going to create one super user called admin, say, and then same for it. So create role admin with login, and then there's another clause called super user, right, with password. And then you can do that. But you have to make sure that not everyone should be a super user. And to create a new role, if you noticed, when I logged in initially, my username was Yugabyte, which was a default role and the user created by YugabyteDB with super user privilege. So not any user can create a different role or sort of thing. The role with the access, with the privilege of super user can only create another role. So you have to make sure that. Now, if you see again, here you'll see this is admin, and then here now we can see yes, role super is true for this. Okay. Now let's. So the same way you can actually also alter the roles. So for example, if you want to create Alan as a super user, you can do that as well. But I'll be showing you that in subsequent examples. And now let me just show you that.
So Abhishek, it might be worth showing, given that Alan in this example is not a super user, can we just try to run some command against some system table and make sure they can't? For example, can they do the same query against PG roles? Can we just try running the same query on Alan's window?
Yeah, sure. So for this, so I have one, I can just grant one privilege to it, and I can show you how exactly that works. Because by default, when you create a login, it gives you the DML commands you can execute by default, because PG role has the access over it. So yeah.
So you think the basic default Postgres functionality allows users, even non-super users, to query PG roles? Yeah. Okay. It might be good to show maybe some example where that this can this person try to. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I have the privilege. Yeah, so I'm just going to do that in a part of a privilege where I can show how you, with a grant and without grant, how it is going to be,
Okay.
this user can do this particular operation or not.
Okay.
So in fact, I can do on the same table that we have right now, employee, right? So let's say by default, Alan will have access to select query, right? So I'll just perform that. Okay. Okay, so here the owner, the Alan is not having the default access on the database employee. It's just Yugabyte because the database and the table that I had created for demo, it was from the Yugabyte default user. So now Alan cannot access it. So it says that, okay, permission denied for table employees. And now if I give grant all on employee here to Alan. Now let's try the same thing. Yeah, so now you see that now Alan can access this particular table.
And while you were doing that, I did try to read up online, which it does confirm that by default, PG roles is queryable in Postgres 2 for non-super users. And there is a way to revoke that permission too, if needed. So, so all good.
Okay. Good. So I'll just try to do another query. Now, since you have given a grant to Alan, an entire employee table, let's limit it to, let's try to remove the update part from the Alan. So we'll remove the privilege of update from the Alan and see if Alan updates the table, how will that work? So I'm just going to now, if I run a query of update command, let's say, update employee set salary is equal to this, and then where name is equal to Abhi.
Can you just can we do a describe on employees? I think it's update employees plural.
Oh yeah, the table name is wrong. Sorry. Thanks for the catch. Employee.e. I think there are.
Is it ename or?
Yeah, it's ename. Okay, so since we revoked the update on the employee from the panel, now it says that permission denied for the table employee. So yeah, this is how it works. Yep.
Let's take a few questions that have been coming in. So one was sort of more logistical. Will there be a Q&A period, and will we have the opportunity to network with other attendees? So the LinkedIn Live platform we're using, I don't think enables the ability for attendees to network with each other than through the chat channel itself that you're using. So Shamako, both for Q&A or for conversations, I think right now this LinkedIn thread is the option for that. And then the next question was, do you support some form of audit logging? Yeah, we very much do. It's also very Postgres compatible. You can choose to audit just DDL, DML, select statements, and so on. It's pretty flexible. But that's a great suggestion. I think that needs to be a YugabyteDB Friday Tech Talk of its own. So we will work on getting that on the calendar for one of the upcoming talks. Let's keep going, and then maybe we can get other questions later.
Sure. So basically, this was a very quick glimpse of how you can create roles and then give access. I also wanted to show the hierarchy, but I think I'll take it in the next slide. So in the slides again. Now the resources part is basically resources, nothing but defines what are the objects and databases, right, that you can have a privileges on, and then this roles can have a privileges to access these resources. So that's how the relationship between these three things are. So basically YSQL again, not just YSQL, but YSQL, which is custom record language as well, defines a number of specific resources that represents the underlying objects. And then the hierarchy goes like from all database to schema and then the table. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the roles are also hierarchical here. So even in fact, if you create one role to access one database object, right? And if you derive another role from the previous role, it will go downwards. So basically, it will work like an inheritance. And in the next table, we have like a list of resources, right? This is not limited to only this much, but this is just an example of what kind of resources we have, for a database. So database, which again denotes a database, which can also include tables and indexes, and the table, which also include indexes, and the roles. So you can also grant roles, role privilege to create a role. So that you can also, roles are also considered as a one resource. And then same for all roles, then the procedures, functions, and the schema, and then the sequence, and etc. So these are the few examples. I mean, if you go to documentation, you'll find the list of all the resources as well. And this is again highly compatible with Postgres. So the SQL objects that are supported there for RBAC in terms of resources are also available in Yugabyte. Now coming to privileges part, again, privilege basically defines the permission to execute something or an action that is permittable, right, on a database. And of course, you need a privilege to execute or do certain operations on your database tables, or in fact, not only table, but different objects as well. And again, as we mentioned earlier, from the hierarchy, the privilege also comes from hierarchy. So the privilege from one role can be granted to another and so on. And it again goes downwards. And these are the list of like aggregated privileges, which are like very common, but this is not a very limited list, right? So all the privilege can work on database table and roles, which lets you, like we created a Alan user. So you, from a login user, you can actually make Alan as a default or probably super user. So in that case, also you need alter. So that is a privilege. Then you can authorize and then connect to connect your database, then create tables, drop, modify, and select. So basically, these are the list of privileges. I'm not limited, but yeah, these are like a common which works on most of the objects. And again, in terms of if you want to create or drop indexes, right? So in that case, you need alter table privilege to do that operation. So let's go into the privilege section. Okay, so this is again a very common synopsis which is supported by Postgres as well. So you can go to our documentation and look through it, like what kind of privileges, and the label wise are defined in YugabyteDB. This is a grammar part of it, but if you want to understand graphically as well, we have a really good documentation where we have created the diagrams of supporting in tables what kind of grants you can give, in schema what kind of grants you can give. So these are in terms of synopsis on the slide, but on the documentation we have a table in a tree format, so you can actually deep dive and look into it. So to a demo part, I wanted to explain one scenario so that we can understand it in a better way. So the example how it is going to be for privilege is, we'll take an example of let's say an engineering team, right, where we have a read access to database and the table, and both let me just put that question here. Yeah. So basically, we'll have 3 different teams: QA, developer, and then admin. And then depending on the levels, we'll give them access. So grant privileges, revoke it, and then we'll also see how you can kind of drop or delete the particular role and the privilege.
So Abhishek,
before
just time check for you. We have about 3 minutes, but I think we can go about 5-6 minutes over. So plan on like about 6-7 minutes for the talk.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just quickly create one database and then a very sample. And then we'll create one table with like an empty table as of now to just show you how the hierarchy and all those things works. So create a table, and then I'll create 3 different roles now, and we'll associate this with this particular table. And these roles are nothing but like the engineering role, developer, QA, and then the DB admin. So if you remember, at the start of the talk itself, we mentioned that the best practice is to create a group level roles. That's what we're doing here. We're creating a group level, which is engineering, and then we'll create another role and we'll associate this with the engineering role, and we'll see how that hierarchy works. I'll just try to do it, keeping the time in mind. There's QA, and then there's maybe. So now we have all the roles. Like quickly list out the roles and then see how. So these are the roles that we had created from the session. So we have QA, engineering, developer, and then DB admin. So now to grant, so all these roles require a read access to a database, right? So we'll just grant that. So integration, the table name was integration, right? So grant select on integration test, which is the table name, to the engineering role. And then we'll map all these roles to engineering roles. So which is like creating a hierarchy from engineering group to people. And then again, we'll also grant in schema access to this table for this group. So we'll do that as well. So grant users on schema public. And then there is this command called /z, which will tell you the privileges on the table, right? And which table has and which is associated with what privilege. So if you can just run that. Okay. Sorry, I was on another terminal. So if you see here, it gives you a code called access privilege. So which denotes that it includes all the privilege for a user Yugabyte, right? But if there is only R for engineering, that means that we have created only read access. Let's clear it now, and then so let's add both developers and other roles to engineering. And before that, I would like to give like all the CRUD operation access. So I'll just do that quickly and then I'll add it to engineering. So if you see grant, we are doing specific DML commands here, like again, insert, update, delete, truncate on table integration to developer. And then the same will go for QA and admin. So just to save time, I'm not going to do for other 2 users. And if you see it again, now developer has, since we updated, we granted insert, update, delete, and truncate. Now developer also has like access to the same functionalities, same privilege, I mean to say. Okay, I think this is what I wanted to show in terms of privilege. I mean, I'm not going to perform operations as of now, but I'll also show you how you can kind of drop a role that we created. Do you want to, like, can we do some operations?
I think we're going to be tight on time. I think the point to make is that, by using the roles at the group level and building hierarchy, it's very similar to factoring code, rather than deal with a lot of individual permissions at the level of every user. And that makes it harder for maintenance when you want to change policy, like, hey, everybody in this department can no longer have access to some particular object. So instead of managing it at the level of a lot of finer grained roles, it makes sense to sometimes create these roles that represent groups, attach privileges to that, and build a hierarchical model, much like you factor common code when writing large programs. So it's basically that idea. And there was one other question.
That's right.
Whether we support attribute-based access control or XACML. We haven't quite looked into it, something that we can follow up on. But no, I don't think we support those. I'm not even aware if it's a PG feature or something additional. But fair enough, we will research that topic more.
Yeah, and just to in last 1 minute, I just want to sum up, like, there are two more things which are called row level security and the column level security, which basically means that you can have another more granular level access to a row, and you can actually write a policy for it. So in the sense, you can actually define set of policies, whether on this particular query or on this particular row, what sort of queries can be executed. And this can be associated with the rule as well. And not only that, there are provision to bypass these policies as well, which we're not going to discuss now. But definitely we're going to come up with a new session or another Friday talk to describe more on these things. And talking about column level security is more of you create a view, and then for the columns that you don't want user to give access to. So you'll kind of create a view for a set of columns which only user can see, not all of it. Then just to give one example of row level security, you can think of it as, let's say you have a bank account, right? And there are two services that are communicating to get the bank account access, but this one service only has access to the amount column of it, and then probably the date it has been created, and not the account numbers, because that might not be required for that particular service. So you can have a granular level access on the row itself. So this is the idea behind it. Again,
I think that example you were referring to, where some columns are accessed by some services and some are accessed by others, that's along the column level. That's more about the column level security, whereas the row level security is being able to say, hey, maybe based on some value of the one of the columns in a row, some users see a subset of the rows and other users see a different subset of the rows. So those are the two kind of cuts you can imagine. We'll cover some of these in subsequent talks for sure.
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone for joining. So definitely join our Slack, and if you have any other questions, put it there. And definitely we got a good questions for this session, and we'll follow up on that. Go to our GitHub, give us a star if you have liked the project, and go try it out. And again, we have this conference coming up called Distributed SQL Summit, which is happening on 14th of September. Register for it, it's free, and then we have really great sessions lined up for you all, comprising of design patterns to deploy databases. How can you deploy your distributed applications, make it, and then all sort of things. So it's gonna be like a full power pack sessions for 2 days. So definitely give it a shot, go and register for it. And thanks again.
Yeah, thanks Abhishek for that talk on RBAC, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us today. As you know, these talks will also be posted on our YouTube channel. And until next time, this is Kannan. See you next week. Thank you very much, and bye.
Yeah. Bye.